Welcome. It is Verdict with Ted Cruz. Week in Review. Ben Ferguson with you, and here are some of the stories that you may have missed that we talked about this week. First up, an activist DA in Philadelphia, yet again letting criminals walk. Why is this happening and who's behind it? We explain that for you. Next up, another judge has decided to step in and say that no, you cannot check and see if someone is an illegal immigrant before they vote. So what was behind this Obama-appointed judge? We break that down as well. And lastly, two big victories for Donald Trump in the Supreme Court when dealing with illegal immigrants. It's the Week in Review, and it starts right now. I want to move on to another big issue. We've got another activist DA that's been busted flat out lying, Senator, this time in Philadelphia. You can say thank you to the Democratic Party, to the George Soroses for allowing this to happen. And this is a story that needs to be on your radar screen as well.
It is, and let's talk about who this is. You know, we talked about Singman and a left-wing billionaire spending money to do real damage to America. This is a story about another left-wing billionaire spending money to do enormous damage to America. In this case, George Soros. George Soros has spent billions of dollars. He is the single most effective political giver, I think, in American history. Now, effective is not a compliment. He is effective in being unbelievably harmful. There are, I believe, thousands of Americans who are dead because George Soros has spent the money so effectively. So he spent propaganda in support of open borders. And you look at all of the people who have been raped and killed by illegal immigrant violent criminals, all the people that have been subject to terror attacks from illegal immigrant violent criminals. But Soros also is creative in his destruction, and he realized that our democratic society has vulnerabilities that he can target. So he doesn't just target a presidential race. That's an easy, big, sexy target.
Yeah.
He really pioneered targeting district attorney races. Now, district attorney races used to be sleepy little races. You'd have a Democrat and a Republican, but they both were prosecutors. They both were going to lock up criminals. If you were a murderer, you'd lock up the murderer, you'd prosecute them. There didn't used to be a massive difference between the two sides on DAs. You'd have a little bit different priorities from the one to the other, but everyone agreed violent criminals will lock them up and throw the book at them. That changed when Soros began flooding millions into DA races. Now, these races didn't used to have millions of dollars in them. So this money just appeared out of nowhere, and he elected what are called Soros DAs.
Yeah.
And Soros DAs are the prosecution side of the Abolish the Police campaign. Look, Soros funded the Abolish the Police campaign, too. If you want to destroy a society, I can think of few more effective ways to do it than eliminate law enforcement, because the result is anarchy and chaos. It's more murders, more rapes, more children being abused. That is... I don't like to ascribe ill intent to someone, but Ben, I will say quite seriously, I do not know any other motivation for George Soros that makes any sense to me other than that he wants to destroy America, because his actions seem perfectly clearly calculated to destroy America.
Yeah, if you look at and it's very calculated. It's prison reform, it's bail reform, it's defund the police. You do that trifecta, which is saying, well, we're going to let people out of jail because we just believe jail is somehow fundamentally wrong. You then say you want to defund the police, so then you have no law enforcement. And then you have bail reform, which says we're going to not put you in jail while we hold you for trial because you don't have a lot of money. So then you're letting rapists and murderers literally back on the street as fast as we catch them. That you combine those three. This is a framework for total anarchy in society, which is clearly what Soros wants.
Yeah, look, just ask yourself the simple, basic question. Is society better if there are more murderers on the street, more murderers in your community, more murderers living in your neighborhood? Any rational person would say, no, I don't want more murderers in my community. Soros says yes. And he spends millions of dollars to elect DAs who agree with him. And so one of those Soros DAs is a guy named Larry Krasner. He is the left-wing Soros DA in Philadelphia. And instead of going in with a mission of, I'm going to go lock up the bad guys, his mission is quite literally, I'm going to release as many bad guys as I can. Now you may be saying, come on, that can't be true. that's so extreme. All right, let me just give you the facts. So just this week, a 5-2 Democrat court. So I'm going to read you what judges who are Democrats said about Larry Krasner. They found that he is so quick to falsely concede error in murder cases to try to free convicted murderers that it has tasked the Pennsylvania Attorney General with checking to make sure that the Soros DA is not lying. Now, let me give you a little context of this, because legally this is astonishing. I've never seen anything remotely like this. So a lawyer, particularly a government lawyer, has the ability to do what's called confess error. And confessing error is you go to the court and you say, we screwed up. We made a mistake. We made a legal mistake. We made a factual mistake. And we're confessing error. You should take it from us. We were just wrong. And courts generally give enormous weight to that, because almost nobody ever confesses error falsely. Like confessing error is against your interest. So
right. If you're saying you screwed up your job, right? That's what you're saying.
So confessing error doesn't happen often, and you usually believe it because it's against the interest of the litigant. I want to read from an appellate decision in one of these cases. Here, in this case reviewed under a King's Bench jurisdiction, the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office, on behalf of the Commonwealth, conceded that LeVar Brown, a convicted murderer sentenced to death for a separate murder, was entitled to a new trial based upon a facially untimely claim under the PCRA. Upon careful review, we conclude this concession was not reliable. More specifically, we find the District Attorney's Office conceded relief, although none was warranted based on the existing record, violated its duty of candor to the PCRA court, withheld material evidence from the court, opposed efforts by amici to gain access to this evidence, submitted a false stipulation of fact, misstated facts in its pleadings, failed to conduct a reasonable investigation, and opposed a required evidentiary hearing. Wow. The predictable result was an erroneous grant of a new trial. These circumstances, troubling as they are, would not warrant a remedy beyond reversal of the PCRA court's order in this particular case if they were confined to one case. Unfortunately, they aren't. Since 2018, the District Attorney's Office has conceded relief well over 100 times.
By the way, if that's your record, that would mean that you're basically the worst attorney in the history of the world.
It's worse than that, but let me get back to it. Let me finish reading it, and then has conceded relief well over 100 times, mostly in murder cases like this one.
Incredible.
There have been numerous instances of untrustworthy concessions, lack of candor, misrepresentations of fact, lack of adequate investigation, and avoidance of hearings. And the problems are poised to continue. There are apparently more than 1,000 cases yet to be reviewed by the District Attorney's Office Conviction Integrity Unit, and the District Attorney's Office vigorously defends its checkered concession program as a necessary corrective to past misdeeds by prior administrations. The District Attorney's Office active, ongoing, and problematic concessions program requires broader remedial action to promote just outcomes. Accordingly, in addition to reversing the PCRA court's grant of a new trial here, we also hold that in any PCRA case in which the District Attorney's Office concedes relief, the PCRA court shall grant the Office of the Attorney General notice and the right to intervene in the case before ruling on the concession. Regardless of the Attorney General's position on the concession, if it chooses to intervene, it may well agree relief is warranted. Its independent assessment and participation will enhance the reliability of the proceedings and the PCRA court's ultimate decision. I've never seen that. And I've practiced law a long time. So you said 100 times, that means they're terrible lawyers. It's actually worse than that. This is not Larry Krasner saying, Larry Krasner, screwed up 100 times.
Yeah.
What he's doing is he's looking at murderers who are in jail right now that were put there by his predecessors, by previous district attorneys. And he's going and finding murderers and saying, we should release you. We should release you. We should release you. And then he's going in. He's not just conceding error. He's conceding relief. Relief means, what do you get? He's saying, nope, throw out your conviction altogether.
Incredible.
Over 100 times, almost all with murderers, and he's lying. Look, the only reason you do that, go back to the fundamental question that I asked at the beginning of this segment. Do you think America is better off if there are more murderers walking the streets or fewer murderers walking the streets? Do you want more murderers living in your neighborhood with your family?
Yeah.
Or do you want fewer murderers living in your neighborhood with your family? Anyone who is rational, anyone who loves America, anyone who is not trying to destroy our nation, the obvious answer is, of course, we don't want more murderers. And yet, George Soros and Larry Krasner both do. And by the way, Singham does too.
Now, if you want to hear the rest of this conversation, you can go back and listen to the full podcast from earlier this week. Now on to story number 2. All right, I want to take a moment. I want to talk to you for just a second, honestly, about how an act of compassion really feels. A few years ago, I made the choice to partner with Compassion International to sponsor a child who was in desperate need. Now, it was a great idea, right? That's what most people would say. All right, it's nice, sure. But you really have no idea just how much that simple act can actually change a life. And I'm not just talking about the child. I'm talking about my life. Now, I sponsored Nadia and got to watch her life change right in front of my eyes, going from starving alone on the street to getting the health care and education that she needs to reach her God-given potential. I got to be a part of that change, and the light of that compassion not only illuminated her, it illuminated me. That's the power of compassion, and it's something I'm trying to teach my children about as well. Now, the light of Christ shines on all of us, and you can feel this for yourself and for your children. You can sponsor a child and have them involved. That's what I love so much. So not only are you changing a child's life, you're helping change the world, but you may even be changing yourself and your family. You can sponsor a child today. Visit compassion.com. That's compassion.com. I want to get to this before we run out of time.
Yes.
And that is election database and this activist judge. Explain this judge, what she has done here. In a simplistic way, what they were trying to do is make sure that people that were not American citizens and those that are not eligible to vote would not be eligible to vote. That doesn't seem controversial. The majority of Americans are in favor of the SAVE Act. It's 75-80%, depending on what poll you look at. And this judge said, hey, you guys can't cross-check in different groups, like Social Security can't work with others. And you guys know we're not going to allow this to happen. That was shocking.
Yeah, so I'm going to read from the Associated Press. A federal judge on Monday ruled that a recently revamped version of a federal tool central to the Trump administration's effort to nationalize elections can no longer be used. U.S. District Court Judge Sparkle L. Sooknanan. I want you to stop and think. There's a friggin' judge in America named Sparkle L. Sooknanan. By the way, she was a clerk for Sonia Sotomayor. She's a radical leftist. I voted against her confirmation, but she is a district judge in Washington, D.C. And Judge Sparkle sided with the advocacy groups that argue that the recent upgrades to the program, called the Systematic Alien Verification for Entitlements, or SAVE, aggregated Americans' sensitive personal data in a way that could result in voters being wrongly purged from voter rolls. Quote, all in all, the federal government has knowingly trampled on the privacy rights of American citizens in a manner that threatens the sacred right to vote. Sooknanan said in an order explaining the decision. This court cannot stand idly by while that happens. She says Congress had expressly prohibited the government from centralizing Americans' personal identifying information, and the federal agencies that created the SAVE program, quote, knew that the database violates these statutory protections. Now, this is a liberal activist decision. It is also a decision that doesn't make sense under the statute. The statutes that she was looking at Number one, the statute is the Social Security Act. And the Social Security Act requires, quote, Social Security account numbers of record that are obtained or maintained by persons pursuant to any provision of law shall be confidential, and no authorized person shall disclose any such Social Security account number or related record. Well, you know what? Trump administration didn't disclose anyone's Social Security number. That
exactly.
If they released, your Social Security number, that would be a violation of the Social Security Act. They didn't do that. Social Security Act doesn't say the federal government can't look at Social Security numbers. Like, the government is one entity, and it is a bizarre system that says you have records that show if people are illegal aliens or not. You, the federal government, are not allowed to look at those records because a law says you can't publicly disclose them to others. They didn't. There's another law called the Privacy Act. And the Privacy Act, they claim, it violated this as well. But again, the Privacy Act does not prohibit the federal government from looking at its own records. I mean, understand, this is a ruling from a radical judge who's saying, even though the federal government, and initially the SAVE database was set up to stop the federal government from giving government benefits, giving welfare to illegal aliens. Now, mind you, it is illegal to give government benefits, to give welfare to illegal aliens. Congress has passed that law over and over and over again. And Democrats, when they're being completely split personality on this, they will say repeatedly, well, we don't give welfare benefits to illegal aliens. They'll say that over and over again. And they'll simultaneously say, dear God, we've got to give welfare benefits to illegal aliens. What a monster would deny them. So they say them both. Remember when every Democrat running for president in 2020 was asked, should we give free health care to every illegal in America? And they all raised their hand. Yep. Every one of them right down the line. But at the end of the day, Congress has passed repeated laws saying do not give welfare benefits to illegal aliens. And Judge Sparkle, and look, by the way, I think it is really impressive that My Little Pony is now a federal judge. But I just wish My Little Pony was not a Marxist. You would think that Judge Sparkle would recognize something beautiful like the Constitution or federal law. It is insane to say that the same Congress that says you cannot give government benefits or welfare to illegal aliens somehow said, but you're not allowed to look to see if anyone's an illegal alien. Nope, the government is blindfolded from looking at your own databases. I'm going to make another prediction in this show.
I was going to say, what's going to happen now? This
decision will be reversed.
It will be, and when, and how quickly?
I don't know how quickly. It might be reversed by the D.C. Circuit. If it's not reversed by the D.C. Circuit, I think it will be reversed by the U.S. Supreme Court. What I don't know is if it gets reversed in time for the election. Part of the strategy of the litigants is delay, and generally speaking, these decisions can take a lot of time. Now, the Department of Justice likely will seek emergency relief from the D.C. Circuit. Now, it will depend on what panel of judges you get. You get 3 random judges on the D.C. Circuit. And then if the D.C. Circuit, probably the biggest danger is they seek emergency relief from the D.C. Circuit and they get a bad draw of left-wing judges on the D.C. Circuit. And what I predict they would do then is just try to delay it till after the election. So they just slow walk it. And it's really hard. And that's so that they can
make sure that they don't have any that's implemented for election day, so you can have more people that can vote illegally.
Yes. And so if you get a good panel on the D.C. Circuit, I am quite confident this will be reversed. And by the way, if the D.C. Circuit upholds this decision, I think the Supreme Court would take the case and reverse it. But in the normal course of things, that would take a couple of years. So that would not impact the 26 election. It would probably be in time for the 28 election. My hope is they take an emergency appeal and the D.C. Circuit overturns it quickly. Or even if the D.C. Circuit rejects the appeal, I want them to make a decision fast, because then they could appeal that to the Supremes. I think the Supremes would act quickly. The danger is the D.C. Circuit slow walks it for another 6 months.
As before, if you want to hear the rest of this conversation on this topic, you can go back and download the podcast from earlier this week to hear the entire thing. I want to get back to the big story, number 3 of the week you may have missed. All right, if you just joined us, we're talking about the Supreme Court, and we just talked about the Second Amendment case, a big victory over Hawaii there. But the Supreme Court also handed President Trump 2 major immigration victories, and this was an exciting moment when it comes to immigration cases and victories that we needed.
Well, that's right. 6-3, the Supreme Court, there were 2 big wins. One case was Mullen versus Doe. The other case was Mullen versus al otro lado, which is Spanish for on the other side. And in both instances, it was 6-3. Both instances, Justice Alito wrote the opinion. So all 3 of these opinions were written by Justice Alito. He had an incredibly strong week defending our rights. One of the cases, the Mullen versus al otro lado, what it concluded is that an illegal immigrant on the other side of the border in Mexico has not entered into the United States for purposes of immigration law. And the Biden administration had adopted a policy where they treated illegal immigrants who weren't in the country as if they were in the country, and that they had a right to all sorts of processes before they come into the country. Now, remember, starting in the first Trump term, President Trump implemented what was called the Remain in Mexico policy, which dramatically reduced illegal immigration in the first Trump term. And that was preventing illegal immigrants from coming to this country in the first place. And this was an effort to ignore the plain language of the immigration laws. And I led an amicus brief. Amicus curiae is Latin for friend of the court. And I led an amicus brief that was joined by 5 members of Congress supporting the Trump administration's policy of stopping illegal immigrants, stopping them from coming into the country. And the Supreme Court agreed with my brief, agreed with the Trump Department of Justice, handed down that victory. And then the other case, which is Mullen versus Doe, the court concluded that temporary protected status, which the Biden administration had awarded to hundreds of thousands of Haitians and Syrians, that President Trump could reverse that it wasn't a permanent grant of amnesty. That decision, likewise, was hugely important for the successes. I mean, remember, in this second Trump term, we have seen illegal border crossings drop 99%. That's a staggering victory. And the Supreme Court upheld the president's ability to continue enforcing the law.
Yeah, it really is. And I want people just to hear. Shannon Bream said this on Fox News Channel about this. I want to take a listen. Here's how she described it in front of the Supreme Court.
And Syrian refugees who were here in the country. And basically what the court has said is that they can't challenge this decision by the Department of Homeland Security, by the administration, that they're the ones who get to make the assessment about whether they leave or not. I haven't read the whole thing, but they do get into some of the claims that by some of those who are advocating for the Haitian refugees, that there was some kind of racial animus. The court says they don't see evidence of that. So I'll keep reading, but it's another very fractured decision that seems to be a win for the Trump administration, which would be the second win for them on immigration. That earlier decision that we talked about that came out just a few minutes ago saying that if you get to the Mexico border, but you don't make it onto U.S. soil, you can't file an asylum claim. So the Trump administration has to be happy about what they've gotten today. We've still got 8 opinions left, and it looks like Monday will be.
So you hear her talk about this ruling in favor of Trump. This is another example of doing the right thing. May be tough. You may go to the Supreme Court, but you're going to win in this scenario.
And by the way, both of these decisions were 6-3, which means that the liberals on the court, they don't care what the statutory language says. They just like in the Second Amendment case, where they would effectively read the Second Amendment out of the Bill of Rights. When it comes to illegal immigration, they would read out the ability to secure our border, and they would try instead embody the open border policies we saw during the Biden administration. Compare how Shannon Bream covered it on Fox. Compare this to MS Now, which is, I guess, what they're calling MSNBC now. I don't even know that anyone watches the show. But listen to the lefties on MS
Total
Now
meltdown.
Losing their minds.
Yeah, total meltdown. Take a listen.
Alan, I want your reaction to what Fallon just laid out for us there, and the concept here that the court is ignoring the history of this administration's remarks about Haitian people in particular. I don't think there is a single American who can say they actually forget what we heard from the president, what we heard from Vice President Vance about Haitian people, just some of the most disgusting and racist remarks you can imagine. I know that you work with a number of Haitian clients. Break down for me just how devastating all of this is about to be.
Very devastating, and I hope we stop talking about it as the Trump administration won or someone won, because right now America lost. There are going to be a lot of jobs that are open and a lot of people in home health care industries that are not going to receive any service because their providers are going to be removed from the United States. There are a lot of people who are going to die and suffer because of the account of this. So I wish this court was more of a court of equity than they say they were a court of policy right now. So I am the chair of the Haitian Bridge Alliance, which is the United States organization that represents these Haitians before the Supreme Court. And we have made the argument that not just his comments, but also in the writings and just recently even the discovered emails from Kristi Noem about the clear conversations they've made about Haitians and black immigrants in general when you even look at the refugee policy. And this court has said, even with that information, there's nothing for us to do here, which seems to be extremely problematic along party lines. And today you've seen something that I haven't seen in the Supreme Court in a very long time, is that you've seen the justice sort of read dissents that are 35 pages from the bar. So even in the Supreme Court, you see not the harmony that generally exists there in peaceful dissent in saying that this is outside the norm. And because it is outside the norm, because it isn't about just policy and procedure, this is about people and human engagement. And the concept that people keep saying that the problem is that it's temporary status and it's been longer than temporary, well, change the word. Don't put people's lives in danger because you feel that that arbitrarily moves something. And as stated before, there are a million so classes of TPS individuals who are here legally working. So they're authorized, they've been vetted. There's none of the concerns that you have with people who may come in undocumented, as well as they're supporting our economy. And when you remove those individuals, you draw down all of those work areas. So all those jobs they're doing, all of these companies that were relying on these TPS workers to work tomorrow are going to have to make decisions about them leaving today. So this is not a big win that we think we're going to celebrate. And there are 350 million or more Americans in the United States. A million TPS holders are not causing some economic burden on the United States.
Senator, you listen to that, and you would think the sky is falling, and that is how they're covering it on MS Now, the former MSNBC.
Yeah, look, the left wants open borders. We saw under Joe Biden 12 million people invade this country, and that included criminals, it included murderers and rapists and terrorists and child molesters. And that's what these advocates want. And by the way, you look at from Haiti right now is rocked with massive violence. It is all but chaos in Haiti as the gangs have taken over. And those are the people that the left is trying to bring in. And let me be clear, the immigration law that was being decided on here says explicitly no judicial review of any determination. And yet that's what the court followed, and yet the dissenters don't care what the statute says. They just want open borders.
As always, thank you for listening to Verdict with Senator Ted Cruz. Ben Ferguson with you. Don't forget to download my podcast, and you can listen to my podcast every other day you're not listening to Verdict, or each day when you listen to Verdict afterwards. I'd love to have you as a listener to, again, the Ben Ferguson podcast, and we will see you back here on Monday morning.